Hey everyone, it's great to be back. I missed you all. I missed doing the show. This is the fun part of my day, and thank you guys for filling in when we could. And Wes, what's going on?
Well, yesterday, minor league baseball players got a card, and the card says, "Hey, consider designating the MLBPA as your collective bargaining representative going forward." And this is a funny thing because for the first 100 years or so of the minor leagues, they could care less. Guys were making no money. Then last year, a lot of them lost their jobs and dreams and everything. Teams folded, and a lot of players never came back. Now, all of a sudden, the MLBPA is like, hey, why don't you sign us up? I almost wish there was one smart minor leaguer that did get rubbed out last year that says, you know what? Let's start our own. We don't need these guys.
Right.
We don't need Tony Clark. We'll go to Rob Manfred ourselves. But you know what the problem is? Rob Manfred, at this point, has run roughshod even over the MLBPA, where Kevin used to always say, and we used to always say they were the strongest in the country. They're not the strongest union in the country anymore.
Doesn't the NHLPA is separate from? There's a body that represents.
It's the PHPA.
PHP, yeah, they represent.
I know somebody who's in that organization.
Yeah, so I mean, at least hockey's got a one-up on baseball in that respect.
Yeah,
they really need to do something because already you're starting to hear rumbling they're going to make more cuts that they realize they don't need all these minor league players. So you better strengthen up because I think the cuts are going to come deeper. I think it's going to be like hockey before it's over.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I think you're really right about that. It's really tough. I mean, it's really it's not. So I was I had a quick thing for you guys. So I know we were all in different parts of the country last week, and I was driving across the country, and to Iowa for my son to do something with his medical situation, which was really rewarding. But then a funny thing happened was we stopped at the Pittsburgh Zoo on the way, and it is a great zoo, and really just like, so I'm walking along, and did I lose you guys? Where are you guys? There you are. Right. All right. Cool. Just making sure I have everybody. There you are. Okay, because I'm trying to share something here. So this is pretty funny. So I sitting there, and I'm like, okay, we're going through the zoo, and I'm always, lots of Penguins fans. It's always kind of fun to like see the Penguins, the different fans in different places, and suddenly I come across this. Let me get this picture up for you guys. Here is it. Come on now. What am I doing wrong? Apologize. Anyway, there was a really great picture of I'll show you at some point, but I'll explain it. I'll describe it to you in the meantime. It was basically a picture of a I'm sorry. I had this ready and I just screwed it up. All right, so let me just show you real fast here. This will be good. Basically, it's a picture of how tall like the Asian elephant is, the African elephant is, various different elephants. And then about so like one's 12 feet, one's 15, one's 20 feet, all the different pictures of elephants. It's kind of neat, typical thing, whatever. And then there's a picture about at 6'5" up. It's just a little sign that someone had drawn on it, Mario Lemieux.
That's good.
Which I really enjoyed. It's kind of like one of those like reminders of, oh yeah, great, hockey's still here. Yep.
I had a interesting Sunday as well, just before we get started on the hockey talk. Yesterday, my grandson, who's 4, was started to ask his grandmother. He saw a moon landing photo, and they were wearing a spacesuit, and he needed to know all kinds of information about why you need a spacesuit on the moon. And then that led to a discussion on gravity, which really blew his mind, his 4-year-old mind, about gravity and what would happen to you and floating away and all that. So I took that as an opportunity because I've always wanted to take some grandkids down to Wapakoneta, Ohio, which is 2 hours from my house. And of course, that's the Neil Armstrong Museum, the home of the man who first walked on the moon. So it was just a great day. This is actually the 50th anniversary of the museum. It was actually in 1972. It took them only 3 years after the moon landing to whip up all the funding. And the town itself, which isn't very big, came up with $532,000,
wow.
Which was probably a lot of money in 1972.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it was a great experience, and he was fascinated by the moon landing stuff. But the one thing that struck me, and I knew this fact already, but it was fun anyway to read it, that the calculations, they had 41 seconds of fuel for those who have forgotten or don't know about it. 41 seconds of fuel left when they made the landing. That's all they had left. So they were basically down to the final bits, and the final calculations, because their original landing spot was too rocky, their final calculations was done by slide rule. Slide rule, and I actually looked it up, and I actually have the kind and variety in my Facebook post today that was used at that. But when you think about that, it takes more computer power to run, or the same amount of computer. Let me get this right here. There's more computer power in your cell phone than was used to send the Apollo 11 to the moon. It was basically done with slide rule and mathematics, and guys walking around with those pencil holders and pen holders in their shirt pockets. So it's just a fun place to go. It's not all that big. We went through it about 90 minutes, but if you ever have time to get to Wapakoneta,
something else you could do. We used to do this in school, and it worked every time. And I think because NASA has a budget, they still have some sort of a budget. You should get your grandson to write to NASA, because these guys will send them back like the pictures of the team. Sometimes they'll autograph them like a baseball team. We used to get those every mission. So I used to have tons of them from like the Mercury, all the different ones. They would send them. You could probably have them start writing to them. I bet you they would send them stuff back. Yeah,
no, that's a great idea. Yeah, I also thought one curious thing is on the wall they list the history of. Oh, that's a cool photo. Okay.
Yeah, I'm showing you the Mario Lemieux thing. Sorry, I put it up there. That's Mario. This is Mario Lemieux right there.
That's awesome.
Pretty funny.
That's awesome.
Anyway, continue on the wall. They list. You were saying, sorry.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say on the wall they list the various. It's a timeline for space travel and so forth. And what I liked about it is they've, in hindsight, they've looked at and they, talk about guys who contributed the mathematics that was necessary to make it work. And, the first African-American mathematician who joined the team, we've seen some of them depicted in movies as well. Goodness. And then the 7 Mercury astronauts, and of course, a lot has been written. We all know they had the right stuff based on movies and the book and so forth. But on this timeline, those guys, they just had their names. It just says, NASA named 7 Mercury astronauts, and they're not any bigger or any bolder. And I thought that was kind of fun that in this particular timeline, they paid homage to the fact that, somewhere in that museum, it says that, even Armstrong said it took almost 400,000 people to get us to the moon. That's what they figure was the number of people that worked on either the parts and all that. And they also paid homage to the animals that were sent into space. There was a dog and several chimpanzees, some fruit fly larvae. I made one of the first orbits as well. And they made mention of those who made it back and those who didn't. So
a bottle of Tang.
There was a lot of stuff about Tang. Of course, my 4-year-old was very interested in the little section about how they go to the bathroom or how they went to the bathroom.
No, of course.
In space.
Well, one of my cousins did work on the bathroom for one of the space shuttles.
Really?
Yeah.
One of the early space shuttles, whether it was the first one or second one, he's an engineer, and that was his thing. He was working on the toilet. It's a big deal.
That they made a big deal of the fact that today's modern astronauts actually have a toilet, and back, of course, in the Mercury and the Apollo, they had a plastic bag and tape.
Yeah.
This also came up in our family. We got into a discussion about procrastination because of this. Like basically the idea that since Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon by a certain period of time, we did it. And it was a lot. It was we everything was pushed forward and all this stuff happened. And we're talking about like when we should go to electric cars, and people are always like, that's not. Someone says we should be in electric cars by a certain amount of time, and another person was saying, well, that's impossible. That'll never happen by then. I'm like, yeah, but don't we have to say that we have to try this? Like we have to do this. If we just say in the next 50 years, we're going to, we'll never get there. So it's like, to me, that's, but it's interesting how this discussion went on. But anyway, let's get into hockey before we do this anymore, before we talk into political discussions at all. All right. Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, August 29th, 2022.
I'm Michael Agello, and I love how Russ steals my thunder when it comes to Tang. Stop it.
Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes to you to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we are going to be starting our team previews today. That means that we are getting close to things, and we are going to have some fun. I do a couple little things. I want a couple little quick rumor type things I've got going on here over the last, since I haven't seen you guys for a little bit of time. And one that's not really a rumor, but it is amazing how the impact that, what Bill Daly said, 5 days ago has had on different people I've talked to, which is that, that we're looking at a situation where the salary cap is going to probably go up significantly a year before they said it was going to. Saying it's going to be after 23, 24 now, as opposed to after 24, 25, which means we have this year still, of course, and then next year will be the last year that we have this sort of low salary cap. And then the following July,
and I can tell you right now, Ak, that news was greeted with popping of champagne in the Toronto Maple Leafs management office, because Austin Matthews' contract ends after the 23-24 season. So he'll be getting a large chunk of that increase.
It is a major difference, and it's a major thing. And that timing on that is huge for certain teams, because everything has been done. A lot of people have already been acting on the fact that it wasn't going to happen that soon. So there already have been, contracts or plans set in place that it would be after 24, 25. If it happens 1 year earlier, that's great. And Bill Daly, I don't get the impression. I mean, we never know what could happen in the world, knock on wood, COVID and all different sorts of things. But Bill Daly's not the kind of person who, would say that this is possible if it wasn't probable, in my mind. Kevin, do you feel that?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like the fact he was willing to talk about it, because, he knows his teams are going to plan for that. I mean, you're not, as I've talked about this before, almost all general managers, in fact, probably all of them have to project, like how much money they're going to have available, 2 and 3 years up the road for long-term contracts. So, this is really big news. And I think Mike's right on the beam about, this is great news for Toronto. But I think there is one, in fact, I know from just talking to a couple already, there's some concern that, you got to guard against just using that money and not being smart about it. That, just because you have it, don't overpay someone.
They all say that.
I mean, that's an impossibility. It's an impossibility.
Yeah, no, Ak, you're right. They all say it, and then they go do it anyway.
I mean, we've seen this through time. It's like if the only thing that saved the league was the salary cap, because of the ridiculous contracts that were being given out. But as we move further to having more money, we're going to find more ridiculous contracts too.
Yeah,
it may be insulting in a sense to say that, but general managers in general have spent like drunken sailors, because I mean, Russ, Glenn Sather spent every dollar that was not nailed down, and the Rangers were probably saved by the fact that he couldn't do that anymore with the salary cap, and then they had to actually start, instead of going out and signing free agents willy-nilly every year, they said, okay, we have to build our organization. And I think that really saved the Rangers from themselves.
It did. I mean, Glenn Sather's big quote always used to be, well, if I had the kind of budget that blah, blah, blah did, and and he did, and it didn't matter.
Yeah, I would say I don't know that they spend like drunken sailors. I would compare it to when you play poker, and you, especially if you're playing Texas Hold'em, and a lot of players at the table have a lot of money. They take more chances. They get in more often. So, and that's what happens with GMs. A team saying, I'm going to go after that player because I have a little bit more money, where they wouldn't go after him before. Now it's 3 or 4 people are in on this guy, and it drives the price up. So the more people that have money, the the higher the salaries go. So that will really change the price of poker in the NHL.
I mean, no credit. No one's ever raised their credit limit not to spend it. I mean, it's like it's in the gist. If people are at the point where they have to, max out the credit and they have to raise their limit, they're doing it to spend it. And it's like that. That's how these teams are. This is what's basically going to happen. Basically, the NHL is raising their credit limit, and they're going to be able to do more with that. And as we sit there and say, yeah, this is Bobby Holik is a good one, Mike is a good one put up there because for sure. But at the same time, we say that they spend crazy money. They do it because someone else is going to do it if they don't do it. And the reality is that this is a game. This is just a game, and the money in the situation is just a game.
Yeah, but just think what you just said. They do it because someone else might do it.
Yeah.
Like, why should they care about that? If they're making a mistake, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I look at it like this. I think if the GMs learned from what they did last time, and the pre-cap, they didn't have capologists, right? Because you didn't need it. They didn't want anybody to curb their spending. But what they have to look at is percentage of cap. And even though the Leafs may have more money to spend on Austin Matthews, they still don't want to be in the same percentage of cap situation that they are now with so few players. Like, you have to make out of that to some degree.
Well, right, and coincidentally, Russ, and of course, the Agello mantra when it comes to William Nylander, his contract is up the same year as Austin Matthews. Okay, you're gonna spend probably close to 20% of the cap on Austin Matthews because he's one of the top 2 or 3 players in the league. And if you can get him at anything less than that, then that's great. But you can't spend, like, say, $13.5 million, $14 million on Austin Matthews and then give Nylander an increase up to $7, $8, $9 million. You just can't do it because you have to allocate money towards other parts of your organization. At a certain point, there's going to be a come to Jesus moment where the Leafs are going to have to realize, and there are other teams that are in certain situations as well, that they cannot spend 30, 40, 50% of their cap on 3 or 4 players. It just is not feasible.
No, it's not. And
I disagree. Like, that's the way it works. That's the way it works, that you spend a bulk of your money on 3 or 4 players. Name me a salary cap where it's not a small group of players earning a lot of money. I mean, that's the way it works. You look around the league.
I look at the way Joe Sakic has set up the Avalanche. We know how the Avalanche is going to have a payday for McKinnon, and we've heard rumors about them. He may be the highest paid player in the league. But if you look at the way that they've spread out their money, okay, Makar's making $9 million. You've got Landeskog making 7, Rantanen making in the 9 area, Nichushkin making 6. Now McKinnon's probably going to make 12 or 13. It's not all just the forwards. They're spending money on the defensemen. They're spending money on Taves. They're spending money on Gerard. With the Leafs, you're spending $40 million on 4 players. And if one of those 4 players gets hurt, or if one of those 4 players doesn't produce, then they're screwed. I think it's just, you can't spend all your money on a small amount of players. It didn't work in Tampa Bay when they had LeCavier and Dan Boyle and Brad Richards and St. Louis, and they're not seeing results, at least in the playoffs, with Toronto. They're not producing when they need to be.
Yeah, I think you look at most of the teams, and they all have, top players. And right now, Toronto's spending pretty good money on a defenseman now. So
7.5.
That's significant.
I mean, we've seen this over and over and over again, and it is how it goes. I mean, no one ever says that he's a great GM because he didn't do anything. Even though that is the case, we all talk about the best trades that are made, or the trades that aren't made, or the best signings or the signings that aren't made. But no one really, at the end of the day, those GMs aren't winning GM of the year, because they didn't do anything.
I mean, the cap flexibility is the key. I mean, just look at this offseason. If you had any kind of cap flexibility, you made out. You might have gotten a really good player. You might have gotten some extra picks. The ones who didn't have cap flexibility, really, they lost out big time.
Yeah, but it's interesting, and we're going to talk about one of them right now, but I find it curious that there was there was a few teams that had a lot of cap space, and they used it. Ottawa used it, Anaheim used it, Detroit used it. Yeah. And yet nowhere do you see anybody saying those teams are going to get into the playoffs. Right.
Well, I'll talk about one of them when we get to them, but I think one of them could.
Yeah. So, you're right.
Could. That's the key word. It could.
Oh, but I'm going to say they are, but I think they could. Right now, I'm just telling you they could, but I think they are.
Well, Well, I mean, great, but I mean, it's not my point is that it just because they spent a lot of money to improve their team doesn't mean they're guaranteed to get in. Of course, there's never any guarantees, but most of the pundits are saying those teams are not going to get in. So,
the other thing, the last thing I'll bring up about the salary cap thing, and then we'll go to this mystery teasing team that we're talking about, is this. There are teams this year that are still trying to that we talked about having to get to the floor, right? That is crazy when you consider the cap hasn't risen at all, right? Because the cap rising also rises the floor. Remember that also plays into this. And a team that hasn't had a salary cap raise in 4 years and isn't at the floor, how are they going to be able to handle this massive increase in salary cap 2 years from now? Like
they'll pay their players a little better. Like they'll, instead of losing 75% of their homegrown players, they'll keep more of them. That's what they'll do. They'll put the money into the homegrown guys. That's
right.
what
I mean, that's what's going to happen. I mean, in Ottawa, they've already started that process. They extended Shabbat. They extended Kachuk.
Arizona will do that.
Norris. They're going to do it with Jake Sanderson when he comes up in a couple years. But the question, the difference between them winning and losing, I mean, you can spend up to the cap and still lose. But with Ottawa, it's where you spend the money and do you fill in the holes that are apparent in your organization. And I mean, we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think Ottawa is greatly improved up front. I just don't think their defense is good enough, but they can address that. Maybe they can improve on that.
Yeah. I mean, will they have the money? Or are they not spending the money now because they don't have the money? Or are they not spending money now because they're not?
I think they're not spending money because there's
nobody out there.
There's nobody out there. Exactly.
Yeah. That's why they're not spending it. Yeah.
I mean, there are still players out there though. I mean,
not guys that can help them.
Well, I mean,
they're at that point where they're saying, okay, we're not going to be any good no matter, even if we signed all these, like the Alex Chasons of the world or whatever.
Yeah, I know. I mean, you mentioned over the weekend, Evan Rodriguez.
Yeah.
And, there's like 2 or 3 players that I think could really help a team. Like Rodriguez is one. If you need a second line center, he could maybe fit in. Russ and I have talked about Sonny Milano and how, he might be a good short-term fill as a scoring winger. If there's anybody out there who believes PK Subban has anything left in the tank, maybe on a veteran minimum contract, he goes somewhere. But other than that, if you look at the list, there's not much else. It's, you've got a lot of Calvin DeHaans and Victor Rasks. There's not a lot there.
Yeah. I mean, there's more than there's usually there at this time because of what the situation we're in, right? That like Kevin and Kevin's notebook really had some great thing, where you talked about also the Sam Gagner, not being signed is pretty astonishing because he is he's a really good player and a really good locker room guy, and he's can fit in your second line, your third line, can do a lot, for you. And he's Rodriguez. There is definite interest in Rodriguez out there. No question.
Definitely.
And the best thing I wanted to throw in, and then before we get to our team, which we're going to talk about today, I wanted in Kevin's notebook, which everybody needs to read. It comes out on Thursday, Friday, area around there. And your number 4 then really got me thinking. This was a good discussion I thought we could have today, which is your number 4 is that Phil Kessel and Joe Pavelski have had similar NHL careers, which is a really interesting.
Right.
That's you buried that at number 4, Kevin. That is one of the more interesting, really fascinating tidbits why you have to read these articles, because it's like, Kessel boasts 399 goals, 956 points in 1,200 games. Pavelski 421 goals, 924 points in basically 1,200 games. The major difference, Kessel has had a career plus minus of minus 148. Pavelski of plus 146, but the other difference is Kessel's won some Stanley Cups. That's
not
I mean, right.
Yeah.
Kessel was a complimentary player on a Penguins championship, and Pavelski was
a pretty big player on a couple of on those teams.
No, I'm not saying
he was complimentary. He was like top six forward.
No. He was on the third line. He was on the HBK line. He was on the third line. But
he was also on the power.
Well, I will say this: the year that
who are we talking about?
Kessel.
The year that Washington won,
Kessel was crucial to them winning.
He was.
Yeah,
I'm not saying he was.
I covered the Game 7 when Kessel got hurt against Washington, and he couldn't play, and he tried to get out on the ice and couldn't. Everybody kind of knew at that moment Washington was probably going to win the series. If Kessel had played, I don't know if Washington would have won the Cup that year, because I don't know if they'd have beaten Pittsburgh. That's how I felt like crucial Kessel was to them in my eyes.
Yeah. I'm just saying that, I mean, Pavelski, he makes the Cup final with San Jose, losing to the Penguins. He makes the Cup final with Dallas. He's a centerpiece player. He's a center and has been a really good one. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from Kessel. He's made Olympic teams. He's won Stanley Cups. He's probably going to end up in the Hall of Fame. But I think his career will sort of be tarnished by his tenure in Toronto. And don't say that won't affect it, because it obviously will. But I think he recouped that by winning cups in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I just think Kessel's the more talented player and Pavelski's the better hockey player.
Yes, agreed.
No, that's interesting.
I mean, that's a good assessment, Russ. I
do agree with that. Are either of them Hall of Famers, Kevin?
I don't think so. I don't. Right. I mean, neither Tkachuk nor Roenick are in.
Right.
Right.
And they're better players than Kessel.
Yes.
So I just don't. I don't know. Like I really like Phil Kessel. You can tell by how much I talk about him. I think he's just the price he's paid is he's a shy human being.
Yeah.
He doesn't. He's a little bit of a misfit socially, and I think because of that. But you talk to the guys who played with him, they like him as a person. They like him as a player. Malkin swears by him when he played with him. I just think he's. This is kind of a cliche, but I think in his case it's true. I think he's been misunderstood.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, okay, he has 399 career goals. I would say he'd probably have to get the 450 to 500 to probably be in. He's got the 2 cups, but if he sets the record for consecutive games, that's probably going to be a hat tip in his favor. I mean, it's borderline. I mean,
he's a borderline player.
Yeah. I think Roenick, I mean, obviously we know Ryan Roenick probably won't get in for a while. Tkachuk definitely deserves to be in. I'll keep making my case for Cujo, but it may be on deaf ears, but we'll see.
I mean, I do think the way he was traded to Toronto has affected the whole trade situation, the whole return thing, the way that all happened.
No, it wasn't Kessel's fault.
It's not his fault, right? But
Brian Burke made a bad deal.
But he in Toronto, if you make, did they give up would you want more from the points you got for what you gave up? Yeah, but at the same time in Toronto, his goal numbers were good. I mean,
that's the point. The trade that Brian Burke made, not to legislate this, and we'll go on about it, but the trade that Brian Burke made, was 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick for Phil Kessel, was the price that you pay for a centerpiece core group player, and that's not Phil Kessel. He's a top line winger. He's not a center, and he never drove the offense in Toronto. He was very good. He scored 30 goals. He did the thing that he's good at. He was consistent. But he's not a star. He's not a superstar. And
his highest goal scoring years were as a Maple Leaf. In his career. Like and like we just said, in Pittsburgh, he was a major player for those Stanley Cup teams. In Toronto, he scored more goals.
Yeah, 30, 32, 37, and 37.
Yeah, and that's, compared to Pittsburgh. I mean, he is the one, Pittsburgh, he had, you look at Pittsburgh, 23, 26, 34, 27. I mean, and then, I mean, obviously, in Boston, 36, 36, 19, 11. I mean, obviously, I don't know, the numbers.
I mean, Tkachuk is 538 goals. The fact that
that those guys that Tkachuk and Roenick aren't in is ridiculous.
Unfathomable.
It's
unfathomable. I get why Roenick's not in this minute. I think he'll get in over time. But the fact that Tkachuk's not in is crazy.
I don't get it either. I mean, because these guys were impact players. I mean, and I've talked about this before, and I think it is going to change. Just because you have 2 cups, or just because you won 1 cup. And more importantly, just because you don't have a cup like that, that shouldn't disqualify you from getting in the Hall of Fame, because there are all kinds of level of contributors to Stanley Cup championships, and some are minimal, some are big, some are great, so I don't know. I mean, I think Stanley Cups will help Phil for sure. But right now, but he was scoring all those goals too at a time when it was hard to score goals.
True.
So I think he's an impressive guy. All 3 of those guys, like Roenick, was just such a dynamic player. and he was physical and he was feisty, and is it really his fault that he wasn't on a team that didn't win the cup?
Yeah.
I think not. So
no, I mean he was when when Roenick was on your team, he mattered a lot. Like he really did. Like in obviously with Chicago, we saw it here in Philly. He was a major player on your team, and he was the guy that you wanted to go to war with, like on your team. He was the guy.
Philly wasn't beating Toronto without Roenick. No way.
Right, that's serious.
Yeah.
I mean, and Roenick played injured so many times and was just like out there, just on one leg or wearing a straight jacket type. And he was just a warrior and a half, and
his first NHL fight, he challenged Marty McSorley. I mean, the kid was crazy.
Yeah, absolutely
crazy is definite.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a good description.
I mean, obviously Kessel fell off, last couple years in goal scoring for sure, and the signing by we
still had 52 points though.
I know.
I'm going to sneeze at.
No, I know.
So I get that his goals fell off, but that team was last in offense, 32 out of 32, and he put up 52 points.
That 52 points has to be a good percentage of the points of that team.
The Cap Friendly had a great statistic on him and the signing in Vegas, and they keep track of in terms of financial impact, points per salary basis. And if he gets the same number of points this year, which I think he could do in that lineup, he would be at $28,000 per point for his $1.5 million salary, and that will put him in the top 25 in the league in terms of value.
Yeah.
And I think that's a given. If he stays healthy, I mean, he is still a gifted offensive player. I get that he looks like Joe Average and, a hot dog munching guy, but, he may not be in great shape, but he can still play.
He can still
somebody who munched a lot of hot dogs last weekend. No, I'll just say that I think the only guy who probably gets close to his bang for buck is Michael Bunting of the Leafs, who had a $900,000 salary and he scored over 60 points. Those guys are cap. They're right. Those guys really help the cap because they can produce at a low amount.
Now,
right. The stats thing is it could be another one too.
Good one. So let's talk about we have a team that's like this today. It has a lot of these things to do with this today, and I do think is going to be an interesting team for debate because this team did a lot this offseason, a whole lot. Some of it because it had no choice to, and we're going to be talking about the Anaheim Ducks. So the Ducks had no choice. They lost some players that they couldn't have really helped. The players that weren't going to sign there. Remembering last year, they had a heck of a beginning of the season. There's no choice about it. They were on target for a while. They obviously fell off, and then they lost a big time, heart and core couple core players of their team at the deadline for sure. But also we just watched McTavish do what he did in World Juniors, and he's an NHL player, no question about it, right? And he's showing he's a force. Let's just go through real quickly with some of the guys they added and lost, and then we'll talk about it.
Well, okay. Ryan Getzlaf retired. They lost Sonny Milano and Sam Steele, who they did not offer qualifying offers, so they're free agents, and they're still free agents. Kev, I give Pat Verbeek a lot of credit walking into a situation. It was only a few weeks before the deadline, and he took over there and he said, okay. The team was already starting to turn. They had a really good first half. The second half, things basically, they reality set in, and he decided, I'm going to trade the UFAs. I'm going to trade Raquel to Pittsburgh. I'm going to trade Manson to Colorado. He dealt Hampus Lindholm to Boston. They traded all of their free agents, and they got good returns on them. They got draft picks. They got prospects. Now they go out in free agency, and they added 3 free agents, Ryan Strome, Frank Vetrano, and the one that was the unsuspected one is John Klingberg. I like what Verbeek did. I still think they're a couple years away from contending for a playoff spot, but he's rebuilding in the right way. You don't hold on to these guys. You move them and you get assets for them.
Well, you're absolutely right. And, I thought when The Athletic came out with its NHL fan survey of management in terms of how much confidence you have in your own management. And they have Anaheim at number 7. I thought it was right on the money.
Yeah.
because I think the Ducks fans have been wowed by Pat Verbeek, and I think they figured out pretty quickly what his MO is. He's a Yzerman type guy.
Yeah.
He doesn't say much, but I know Pat Verbeek. So when there was nothing coming out of Anaheim about trading Gibson, I knew it was total BS. Verbeek is just not interested in trading Gibson because he wants that goaltending. He's still under 30. He's got a long-term contract, so everybody knows what they're paying him. And he knows the rebuild isn't going to take as long as it takes in Detroit. I mean, they've got Zegras and Drysdale, having already had the pump primed. They've been out there, they've been playing, they're moving closer. Now he's got McTavish coming in, who I think is more advanced than you normally see because of his physical capabilities.
Yeah.
So, he's going to come in and have an impact. I mean, he's not going to be the player that he's eventually going to be, but, he's going to be a good, rookie player. And he's got other players that are, and the fact he was able to convince, now I'm on a complete blank. Who did he sign the defenseman from? Klingberg, yeah. He convinces Klingberg to come in for a year, and you know how he did it. He said, look, come in, try us out for a year. We'll try you out for a year. We'll give you the salary you should get for that year, and if you don't like it, you can move on. But if you do like it, maybe you'll stay. Yeah.
And you get to spend 5 months in Southern California. And the absolute worst, you get to be in the sun of Southern California through the winter months.
I look at it like they still don't have enough goal scoring. Like they're going to bring in McTavish, sure, but they lost Raquel, even the loss of Milano. It might be a total wash for what they did last year and what they have coming in this year for goals. And then when I look at the blue line, they had too many offensemen and not enough defensemen. And I think that's where it hurts them. But otherwise, I think they're going to be exciting to watch. They're definitely going to be a fun team, but their defense is not where it needs to be.
Two guys, Russ, I feel that with their goal scoring, that you're kind of, the signings of Ryan Strome and Frank Vetrano are significant to me. Like they are.
You're talking about 15 goals each. You're talking about 15 goals each for the other guys. What are we talking?
I think more key to them, Russ, is Troy Terry repeating what he did.
Well, I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt and say he's gonna.
And after a difficult season with injury, whether Maxime Comtois can come back to what he did 2 years ago.
Look, Lundestrom at 16, maybe he gets 20, but they don't have enough goals for him.
I'm going 25 on Vetrano. He's my Manji.
25? No.
Yeah. Well, he thinks he's a 25 goal scorer.
He
does. He thinks he's a 25 goal scorer.
That's always the issue with him. Everybody likes him.
Yeah.
They think he's a good secondary contributor, but they can't seem to convince him what he is. And I think that kind of holds him back. He doesn't get the money that he thinks he got. He got an okay contract, but probably not.
He had 24 goals once.
Well, so, I mean, on defense, which has normally been a strong area for the Ducks. I mean, Drysdale is young. He had a decent first full season. Fowler is dependable, and Shattenkirk is also, point guy in the power play. Russ, I think the guy, depending on, how early he makes it, or whether he makes it at the beginning of the season, is Drew Hellison, who they got in the deal for Manson. They signed him to a contract. And I think they have high hopes.
A little AHL, little.
Maybe.
Otherwise, I think maybe he's a guy that can come up half season. He does play good defense, but I think you need to see him playing a little while before you make that determination.
Right.
But over time, it'll work out. Yes.
But you just rattled off 4 pretty high level defensemen. They're
high level, high skating. They're not all high defense. That's the problem.
No, but I mean, they don't, like you said, they need a little offense. And I think there is going to be some growth in offense because Zegras is going to be better. McTavish will come in and he'll create.
Klingberg will get some power play goals. How many of those are going to get goals? Like Shattenkirk doesn't score goals like he used to.
No, but he's still a good transition guy.
Yeah.
He creates offense. So I think that defense, they'll be better defensively just because they're better offensively. They'll have the puck a little bit more.
Right.
I'm not taking them to. I think they have a chance to be a good team, but nobody's picking them to get in the playoffs unless it's just Russ.
No. Mine is a different team. It is not.
No. Yeah. I have them 5th in the Pacific, finishing out at the playoffs.
Yeah, that's where I have them. Yeah.
I haven't done it yet, but yeah, I don't know. I might go a little bit. Maybe I'm not sure. I have to do it, but they're going to be close. I think. I mean, closer than I believe people think they will be. At least I do think that they've
I'll
added.
say this: I think they're going to be very entertaining. I think they have a lot
Yeah,
of.
they're entertaining.
Well, they've
Yeah.
always been. They've been that for a couple of years now. There's no question. There's a guy that they did not sign, who is sitting out there still as a UFA, which is really and one of the UFAs that just I was kind of forgot about. I mean, I was shocked when I realized that they hadn't signed him because I kind of just assumed they would. But that's Zack Aston-Reese. I kind of just assumed that Aston-Reese would be signed. I'm a big, Preston, as we talked about it before, I'm a big Aston-Reese guy. Like, I think he is a big-time fire plug player who has a lot more skill.
He's a quality bottom 6'4", and he was a salary dump in the Raquel deal. I'm actually surprised he hasn't signed someplace on a 1-year deal.
They have Comtois, that's why I think they wouldn't get him.
Yeah, and he wants a little too much money than they're willing to pay right now for bottom 6 guys. I mean, that's was my read on it.
I think I'm going to call him a middle 6 guy. Honestly, I think he's got the potential to be a middle 6 guy, and I don't know.
I think he would have shown that by now.
Yeah. I think.
I mean, he's not a young man.
In Pittsburgh, he wasn't going to get that chance. In Pittsburgh, he wasn't going to really.
He's not a young man, though.
Actually, I think he's a quality bottom 6 forward. He's not a middle 6.
Yeah, he's good. He's a very good bottom 6 player, I think.
I mean, last year Anaheim was 21st in goals. I'll put him 20th. There you go.
Yeah, they'll move up. They will.
Not 20.
Now, I just wonder, though, okay, if it's another challenging year defensively, I mean, I will grant your point, Kev, that, he wasn't going to move Gibson. But we heard the talk about Gibson maybe sort of getting frustrated with the fact that, they haven't made the playoffs.
He said not, though. He was quoted. Okay. He was interviewed twice.
Yeah.
He said once on a radio show and then interviewed by The Athletic, I got no interest in moving, Right. So I tend to take guys at their word,
He's been a pretty straight shooter. I've interviewed him a bunch of times, minor leagues and up in the NHL. He's a pretty straight shooter, so I tend to believe him.
I want to bring guys. I just looked this up. Zack Aston-Reese just turned 28 10 days ago.
Yeah, that's not a young man.
Not that young. Yeah,
that's not that old.
Superstar it is. Like in this league, it's at the point now where you know what he is, and like Kevin said, he's wanting a little too much. I got guys that can do that for less.
Unless he's prepared to take a veteran minimum 1-year deal.
Right.
Like if he's sniffing around for $2 million, he's not getting it.
Yeah. I mean, Dave Gagne, there I go again. That was his dad. Sam Gagne scored 13 goals last year, and he got paid $850,000, and that's what he's looking for now.
Right.
So, I'm not sure that you're going to get 13 goals out of it, Aston-Reese.
I agree that he's asking too much money, but I think that he could also be he has tended to be hurt a lot. He's been missed a lot of time with injuries, obviously. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, he is when you look at his games played, he's never played more than 57 games in a season. But he has put up the equivalent of basically 20 goal seasons playing half the year. So it's like when you think about it, you're not really, if he can stay healthy, and not only that, but just what he brings to it and the kind of excitement he would bring to that team, I believe, with the kind of players that will be around him and the kind of leadership he brings to that team. Because I've heard everything I've heard about him as leader is that he's top notch. So I don't know. I'm really kind of surprised. I mean, maybe he ends up signing there for less and just realizes that there's an opportunity for him to play minutes there. But I think that I'm really surprised. Like, this is the guy. If I'm Seattle, I'm all over him. Like this is a player who brings excitement to the rink, brings excitement to your fans. He's gonna make things happen when he's out there. I'm all over him. I don't know why Seattle wouldn't be all over him.
I think it's his injury history that hurts him too.
Yeah, and I would say too that you and I know what kind of person Pat Verbeek is. Like, he's a high character guy. So like, if he decided that they could live without him, I would trust his judgment on that.
He's probably thinking I can go with a younger guy who's going to be on an entry-level contract and get pretty close. And there's an upside there because it's a 20 or 21 or 22-year-old guy instead of a 28-year-old guy who you have to sign to another contract next year because you're only signing him to a 1-year deal. I can see Aston-Reese like hooking on with a Buffalo or or some team like that's still got openings and still has cap space. But
if he took on with Buffalo or some team like that, like you're saying, Mike, he's going to be a factor, I think. I mean, and I think that at the end of the day, I mean, I know that, from talking to people in Pittsburgh, they did not want to trade him. They really did not want to trade him. They had to move him.
They had to make the money work.
Yeah, they had to move him to make that trade, but they didn't want. So Burke really thought he was a high character guy. So it's like,
yeah. I mean, I'm sure. I mean, we're kind of. I think it just comes down to the definition. I mean, we all think he's a guy that's worth having on your team and can contribute. Yeah. But what's your definition? Like when you're 28, you are who you are. Like everybody knows what kind of player you are, and I think everybody knows what kind of player he is. But I don't think he's suddenly going to, be a guy that you're going to put on the second line. He's just fully established as a nice quality bottom six forward who can contribute a lot. And the problem when you're trying to cut salary and stuff, those guys end up jettisoned first because you don't want to pay him 1.8 to do something that, as Mike points out, you can get someone to do for $850.
I mean, the perfect example. I heard Aston-Reese's name connected to Toronto before free agency, and in his place they signed Abe Kubel for $1 million. I don't think probably at that point Aston-Reese, if they were truly talking to him, would have taken $1 million. Now he probably would because it's 3 weeks away from training camp.
I would have taken Reese over Obel. I mean, I like Obel, but I would have taken Reese over him.
Yeah, but all right. So I'll give you an example. The Rangers were looking for an extra forward, and they brought in Jimmy Vesey cheap because he had a couple of really good years with them. 17-goal years, and so it's like Reese has never done that. So they would rather take a chance on a guy that has done that than pay the double salary with Reese just to get that extra toughness. Like they have Sammy Blais for that. So that's so that's where I think it's hard to fit him in.
Yeah. No, I see it. He's definitely one of those guys that's getting squeezed because of the salary squeeze. There's no question about it.
Now, can we finish off? Because I know that it's been mentioned the last couple of days. A lot of Patrick Kane chatter, and I think we're going to go through this. I don't know if Patrick Kane's going to get traded before the season or traded before the deadline, but I do think I'll go out on a limb and say he's going to be traded, based on what the Blackhawks are doing with that organization, which is just like, selling everything off like it's a yard sale. But I have to say that, Kev, if there's a contending team out there that is interested in Patrick Kane, the only way anybody, Colorado, Edmonton, Toronto, whoever it is, it's going to have to be a 3-team trade because they can't take even $5 million under the cap. Nobody's got that room.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's why I don't think he's going to be traded right now, for sure. I think they're going to have to wait, and that's a bit of a gamble because you can't, you don't want him to get hurt. I mean, let's just think back a year ago when Patrick Kane said, I want to stay here, and I think he did, and I think he is just as surprised by all this. And if you remember, they had signed Seth Jones; they were going to go for it. And all that. Now it's completely changed. I mean, again, this isn't going to happen, but what the Blackhawks should do is go to Patrick and Jonathan Taves in particular. It's going to be harder to trade Taves, even at $5 million. At $5 million, you're going to be able to trade Kane at some point because there are going to be injuries. Teams are going to, have all that. So that as we move into the season, it won't take much, and they'll be able to do that. Taves, that'll be a little bit harder. He just, unless he comes out of the gate and plays, pretty well. But they should go to him and say, well, what do you guys want to do? Where do you want to go? Right. We'll try to work it out. They won 3 cups for those guys, and they were the 2 biggest, most important players. I mean, there were probably 5 or 6 that were really important in all 3 of those, but those 2 were the most important. So it'd be nice if they would, treat him with that level of respect. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think they're going to just send him where they want to send him.
The other problem with this is too, Kevin. I think this is why it'll happen at the deadline. 1, like you said, fitting him in is hard. But 2, I don't get the feeling that Patrick Kane will definitely extend with the team he gets traded to either.
No.
So that's another issue where you kind of know, all right, I'm giving up a certain amount of assets to go on this cup run with Patrick Kane. Like a team like the Rangers might do it, but they'll have, they'll be in better shape cap-wise at the deadline, and they'll know at that point what assets they feel like giving up.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you'd give up a lot more.
I don't even think it's that big a deal, though. And you know, I've had this conversation. It is interesting. Like this GM was talking to me about, you know, it's almost, you know, there are two groups. There are half the teams, and you know, he's obviously generalizing because it's not really 50-50 split. But he was saying there are a group of teams that would want to bring Patrick Kane in to have him sign, and another group don't have another group that doesn't want anything to do with a long-term contract with Patrick Kane. They want him to be a rental. And he said, because of that, he said the price isn't going to be all that different. Like he said, we know what a rental is. A rental goes first round pick, young prospect, another piece. He said that's what a rental is. Yeah. We all get it. Guys of that ilk, you know, that's what it's going to be, and that's what it's going to work out. But he said if you're getting him long term, you know, is it a second first round pick? Well, maybe, but maybe not. You know, maybe let's just see what happens. So he said, you know, if you're Chicago, they could. Think to themselves, well, it's not going to be that much different. Let's wait it out where we're going to have more suitors, because the longer we get in, the players get injured. They got more cap space, you know, all that.
Yeah, I know from talking to a couple, I know that, you know, there were teams that called about him right at the draft when it became obvious that Chicago was going this way. And they were told at that point, at least, that he wasn't available, which was an interesting thing, you know, to be told, you know, not available now. And that led me to think that Chicago was very much thinking, well, you know, we can get way more for him as a rental, and at the deadline, you know, that we'll hold off. But that is a risk, because you put Kane into it, he could get hurt, anything could happen. Yeah. He could be good enough that keeps you out of the sweepstakes for the best pick overall. I mean, he is.
Nobody's trading.
They got Peter Mrazek, so that takes care of that. But continue.
Well, if I'm allowed to just play the role of the cynic, which I rarely do, I would say Chicago may not want to trade them because they were still trying to sell sponsorships and board advertising and late season tickets and all that kind of stuff. Because it's not like they came out and said, you know, we're going to go full rebuild. There was no letters to season ticket holders. All of a sudden, they just made moves, and everybody said, "Oh my God!" Yeah, you know, they're giving up. So they get the white flag, and it's, you know, so
yeah, no, you're right, and then that, you know, they are, you know, if he's healthy and playing well at the trade deadline, he'll be one of the most intriguing and attractive trade deadline players we've ever seen. You know, because when you put him if he's at the top of his game going into a playoffs, he's just such a game changer. He, you know, as a playoff player, we've seen what he does in the playoffs. It's ridiculous, right? So put him on a good team going into the playoffs. I definitely think there's at least a first round draft pick involved there.
Yeah, there'll be a first round pick, but it'll be lottery protected for any team that is sort of on the edge, and then teams that are definitely going deep in the playoffs won't care, and then it won't.
Yeah, and there'll be a conditional first based on whether he signs or not. I mean, those are you can almost it's almost like you can put it together.
Formulaic.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it's already fully established.
But I don't think he'll go with any team in the league either. I think he's gonna, you know, be a little picky, and they'll help him out that way.
I'll tell you what, though, you know, I'm usually pretty open minded. I think anything can happen in sports because I've seen it happen. But I do think you can pencil in the Colorado Avalanche as being one of the top three contenders. Like I think they know that Patrick Kane would come there. I think they could see McKinnon and Kane flying down the ice together.
Yeah.
You know, Kane's, you know, I remember Ken Hitchcock, I brought it up before, said nobody competes harder in this league than Patrick Kane. He said, you know, I don't remember him ever taking a shift off. When the team was bad last year, he was still working hard every shift. I just think that the Colorado will make every effort because, you know, you're playing with house money when you won the previous year.
Right.
It works out. It works out perfectly because McKinnon's got the last year of his current contract, so he's under there for less. And you could add Kane. I mean, I think the prospect of Kane playing with Connor McDavid, you know, if it's Edmonton, makes a lot of sense. Or Kane playing with Austin Matthews because they're, you know, I know that they train in the off season and they're buddies. So I mean, I think there are a number of options, but Colorado makes a ton of sense, like because they are playing with house money. The
other thing about Colorado is, you know, they've got a couple of good young players. You know, Makar is way young, and They've got other young players as well. So giving up a late first round pick to them, they got no problem with that.
No,
So,
I agree.
I mean, it's interesting because I put this forth to my readers is in my Year of the GM game and had them put forth their best offer. And the offer that I actually settled on, which I wrote about today, was the Colorado, the best offer. And this was I thought a really well thought out offer. So you guys can tell me I'm wrong, but I think that this was pretty well thought out. So it was so basically it's Papa Forever wrote this together, and he said Kane would this is moving Kane through Arizona as a way of eating some salary, and he just came to Arizona for future considerations with Chicago retaining 50%, and then the Avs would send a first, second, third, and Mikhail Maltsev, like another player, like you're saying, they've got some good young players, right? He's a guy who was really good in the AHL last year. Sending that through to Arizona for Kane, and then Arizona would send the first, third, and Maltsev to Chicago to complete the deal. And Chicago, they would end up keeping a second. So Arizona would end up with a second. Chicago would end up with a first, third, and Maltsev. Colorado would end up with Patrick Kane.
I think they would need someone better than Maltsev. I do. I think.
yeah,
I think it has to be. Huh?
It's the first, second, and third, though. I mean, it's like
I don't think they'll get the first, second, and third. And I think even if they did, they would rather have. They need to have a more tangible player than that, and just have a first and second. Like that's just my feeling.
Yeah. Well, also you're going to have to give Arizona more than a second.
Right.
They're delivering one of the best potential rentals that we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, and they know that. So, we saw what they were trying to hold up teams for this summer on, with first round demands of first round picks. So I think you're going to have to give them more than a second to do that. That's why I think, if they wait, and they may not have to even wait all that long, somebody's going to get hurt. And that's going to, open up cap space, and then they can just do a $5 million because it's really going to increase the cost if they have to go through a third party.
Yeah.
Right. And look, I mean, Colorado it may come down to it. Maybe Sam Girard's in that deal, and that's how they floated because they won without Sam Girard before, and Sam Girard's an attractive piece for anybody, and they can wash the salaries and without involving that third team.
And they have to sign Bowen Byram pretty soon,
right.
So they have to clear money to be able.
I see Girard being in that deal.
Yeah, but I mean, how old is Girard now? He's still relatively
27.
Is he 26 or 27?
I'll double check.
Yeah, well, my only point on that is does that help Arizona or Chicago? I mean,
I think it helps Chicago. I do.
I think you're better off trading Girard somewhere else and getting assets back.
Well, maybe they flip him. Maybe it's a three-way. And Girard is we're both wrong. He's only 24.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he's still only 24. Jeez.
Yeah, well, that's better. I mean, now all of a sudden, if you're Arizona, you can think about that. So,
yeah.
And he's locked up on a long-term deal. So
And he's locked up, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think you need Arizona anymore. I think you could do it without it if you put Girard in the deal. That's my point.
That's if Chicago wants Girard, right? Yeah. So and that Chicago would have to take Girard. I mean, and it's true that
and I think they would take him gladly. I do.
Our Papa Forever guy who proposed this trade also pointed out that Elliot Friedman has said that Sakic has called about Kane before for the last couple of years.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Well, I always sort of. I always felt, even though he really didn't hint that he would go with interest in Colorado, there's a feeling in the way he has talked about things that he's got his eyes set on Colorado. I'm like a Kaneologist. I've known Patrick a long time, and just the way he speaks and talks, like it feels like he'd be interested in going there. So
let's just say this. I have not heard one rumor in the last 3 or 4 years about Patrick Kane coming home to Buffalo. And I don't think it's going to happen.
No, but I've heard him to the Garden. I have. That's something I've heard that for the last 2 years.
Yeah. I don't no, there's never ever been a rumor about that. I think that's mutual. I think they just feel like it wouldn't be a good fit, that getting him home maybe. I mean, let's be honest here, and I like Patrick, but he's gotten himself in trouble in Buffalo.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. And I do agree that would be it. I mean, I do think that Florida would be an interesting team to look out for in the Patrick Kane thing. We've seen that they do interesting moves. Whether or not he would go to Florida, I know there's.
Let's say he's got a chance to go to Colorado or New York. I think Florida will lose out on that.
Yeah, I would think so too. But there is a relationship with Zito and USA Hockey is also.
Sure, but I think that.
So it's and Zito's from Zito.
They're running out of assets too.
In Chicago for a long
Yeah.
time. They are running out of assets. There's no two ways about that.
yeah, like they can't even they can't even give up a first round pick.
No, there's no two ways about that.
What, the
That's true.
22nd century? Like when the next?
It would have to be
first round pick.
It would have to be some kind. It would have to be. They'd have to give up like a Lundell or a major player. Somebody along those lines.
Well, they're not going to do that.
Which I wouldn't think they would do.
No,
so
they won't do that.
So. We will trade for a first round pick so we can trade it away.
So
yeah. I mean, you have to also remember just the desperation to win in certain places in the league is different than other places. So there's all different that plays into this. Really does. And you have to remember that does play into the different situations. I do think that. I mean, playing for the Rangers, who wouldn't want to? Patrick Kane would definitely, I think, want to play.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great situation. I mean, going into New York, a great team. Also, just playing for the Rangers in general and playing in New York City. I mean, what he could do for his himself beyond even just hockey.
Yeah, and let me throw this out here because it's interesting. We don't talk about this anymore. Remember, we used to always talk about playing in certain arenas, but like Montreal still has kind of an aura of playing in that building. But like Madison Square Garden, that's it now. How many people talk about, the fans, Madison Square Garden playing all those home games like that. The old buildings are gone, but Madison Square Garden, it's still there. So I see that as well. And wearing the Ranger jersey is a cool jersey,
I mean, and it's New York City. I mean, just everybody who when you
and him and Panarin, they know each other. Like
Panarin, obviously, there's a relationship.
Yeah, that's another great point. I'd actually hadn't even considered that, but
sure. I mean, that would be, and that might but if Panarin slows down at all, that could bump him back up too. So. Yeah, there's a lot there. I mean, those are two teams that I think you'd have to throw in the front, for sure. I mean, there's no two ways about it if this comes down, and it will come down at some point this year. I do agree with everybody on that. I don't know when. I think that it will be a matter. I don't think the Rangers could do it until the deadline. The Colorado Avalanche might be able to do it before the deadline. They might be able to figure it out. They might be able to do it earlier than the Rangers, I would think. But maybe we'll see. But, no one's going to give up anything significant if they're in the race that's going to hurt them right now. So there's also that too, right? So it's a really tough one. I guess I wanted to talk just briefly before we go about the signing of Stastny to Carolina as well. I don't know if you guys have discussed this last week at all.
We did.
Oh, you did? Okay. Man, we really don't have to talk about it too much. But
say your piece, and we liked it.
I like it too. I think that it's interesting hearing Brind'Amour be interviewed over the weekend on XM's playing their things. Sirius XM. I heard every time I got in the car, I heard Brind'Amour being interviewed. I don't know why they were on repeat for some reason. Every time I got in the car, I heard the Brind'Amour interview over and over again. By the fourth time hearing it, I was pretty convinced that Brind'Amour was.
Better than my draft wrap up being on replay because they've been playing that too. So
yeah. It really got how upset Brind'Amour was with the guys that they lost in Carolina. Like Niederreiter, these guys, he really liked these guys. Brind'Amour had a real emotional connection to those players, more so than I usually hear coaches have when they talk about it. And they said, well, we're trying with Pacioretty and Stastny, you're trying to replace those guys. But he didn't sound like he was optimistic about them replacing those guys.
No, but in a way, getting Stastny is sort of like when he went to Carolina. It's pretty similar.
Yeah,
they each had 21 goals. They're 5 points apart. Stastny's better than Trocheck on the faceoff.
Yeah.
They're good defensive forwards. They're similar guys. The only thing is Trocheck is a little feistier. That's all.
Yeah, a little feistier.
And Stastny is slowed down.
Yeah, slowed down. But he's super smart, and that I think that changes things. His ability to help players around. He's like a coach out there. So that's going to be.
I tell you one funny thing about that situation. Brind'Amour does not. Like a lot of coaches, they work to try to get input on personnel decisions. And Rod Brind'Amour does not want to be involved in personnel decisions.
That's really
He
interesting.
doesn't want to be involved because he coaches and he wants the managers to manage, and he has attachments to players, and he doesn't want it to get in the way of.
That's smart.
Listening to these interviews and you saying that is really fascinating, because you could really hear in his head that he would probably be smart enough to know that he would be too emotionally attached to talk about that.
Right. But I do know they wanted to keep Niedermeyer. Niedermeyer thought he was going to get a lot more money than he ended up getting. And that, I thought that was a bargain signing for Nashville. He scored 46 goals in the last 2 years. He's played pretty darn well.
He's a pain in the ass on the ice too.
Well, he's big. He's just hard to move. He's
really like a Predator type player too. Really big.
He's a little dirtier than most Predator players, but he'll fit in.
Yeah, I mean they have that that effort more than skill type thing. That he's got.
Let me throw something out. We can talk about it next one, because I had a discussion with somebody about this. Are the Predators on that Winnipeg Jets treadmill that they're on, where they're not getting any better, but they're not bad enough to get a good draft pick, and they're just going to be
better than Winnipeg. They might be just a hair better.
But they're just not getting anywhere. They're not good enough to really compete.
Yeah.
They're not bad enough to get good draft picks.
Right.
So they're just going to be, the Washington Capitals were on that for years too.
I'm going to sit back and say that the Jets are on the Predators bandwagon. So I think the Predators have been that for 25 years, Kevin. I mean, the reality is, they had the 1 year they went to the Stanley Cup Finals, but they always just make the playoffs. They didn't make the playoffs for a lot of years. No, in the beginning, but then they had a lot of years they did, and they would be barely making the playoffs when they never were. I mean, there was a couple years they were really high seeds, but not often, right?
I think in a way they've been victimized by the fact that they signed players who they thought were going to be big stars in Johansson and Duchesne. And Duchesne had a really good year last year, but really they have not gotten their money's worth out of those two players, except for last year with Duchesne. I mean, Yossi's one of the best defensemen in the league. He's worth every penny, but I think that they're sort of just a team with median talent. They've had some good players come around, the unsuspected guys like Jeannot and I think Saros. Russ and I didn't think Saros was going to be much, and I think he's he's done much better than I ever thought he was going to be. But still, they've
added guys who should score goals this year, and sometimes they don't, and sometimes they do. But they've added players. I mean, they should be better, but
they should be better, but it won't be enough.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I like what they did. I mean, the McDonough signing was terrific.
Oh yeah, that's a great signing.
Yeah. So
the trade, yeah.
Yeah, they're going to be fascinating to talk. They're always interesting. I have, you haven't shared that personal, pulling for the Predators. We like them. We like what they do, and it's just
I got to be honest, and I want to get your opinion on this, because you weren't here when we talked about it. But in the athletic poll, David Poile did not fare well.
I know
the fans there, and I think nationally. And I actually talked about this with someone who's very familiar with Nashville, and he said he thinks it's true as well. The dissatisfaction in Nashville is far greater than the national perspective realizes it.
Yes,
that people are unhappy, and David Poile did not fare well. I like David quite a bit, but fans just don't like what he's done there.
I think nationally, people think that Southerners are always kind and nice and patient.
They're not.
But they're not. They act that way. If you listen to the call-in shows, when they talk about Poile, they're like, "Oh, like him, God bless him, he's a great guy." But then they'll throw in the whole thing. And that's
I learned this too from 2 years ago at the Winter Classic, when they were in it against Dallas, because I know some people who do Nashville radio, and this isn't Pete, this is other guys.
Yeah.
And I couldn't believe how sour they were on.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. No,
it was shocking to me, actually. It was more than I thought it would be.
Yeah, they're really unhappy, and there is tremendous pressure to stay in the playoffs. There, and yet it's not good enough. Fans, the real fans there, they know, making the playoffs isn't good enough. But if they don't make the playoffs, they're really fearful that, that they won't be able to sustain this momentum there, that it won't take much to, it really is. And I keep telling people this. It really wasn't that long ago until they had to save the franchise. So.
Right. It wasn't. It wasn't at all. And I was there for it. It's you're right. And the reality is also, any GM who's been there as long as he's been there people have grown to not like a movie made here and there. It's like he's definitely pissed off everybody at some point.
Well, I think it's because they're the number one team in the city too, because the Titans have never really had great years. Last year they were pretty good, but so I think they're the number one team in the city too, and I think that puts the extra pressure on.
That's quite a statement, Russ. I don't know if they are, but I think they want to be. I think the NFL.
I think they are with the fans. I mean, I just don't get. Look, I even know someone who coaches with the Titans. I don't think the Titans have the same pull on the city that the Preds do. I don't feel it. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, it's quite a statement. If the Preds, I mean, there aren't that many cities in the U.S. where that's the case.
I know.
Like how many cities, and to put that in the southern city like that, which is
the Canadians have the pull over the Alouettes, if that counts.
Yeah, but it's a real football area.
It's a nip and tuck battle between the Leafs and the Argos.
Right.
Yeah.
Although for 1 year the Raptors were probably ahead of the Leafs for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Is there any? And Mike, you probably have the best handle on this. What's the most popular? What's the Yankees of the Canadian Football League? Like, is there one? Is there one team?
Probably Edmonton.
Although Winnipeg's been winning a lot the last couple of years, but
the Blue Bombers are a cool name too.
Yeah,
they are.
But Edmonton, they had Warren Moon, and they had teams that were good after that. So I would say, I'm not an aficionado.
It's me. I used to cover a little bit of the CFL. I go Edmonton, Toronto, Winnipeg. All three of those are really close. Okay. I think Winnipeg might actually have the edge over the other two right now.
Yeah. There is no other team in Montreal that the Expos found that out. It's just the Montreal. That's it. They are what they are.
Right.
It's always it's Canadians, which is what's wonderful about it. All right. So
I still think the Golden Knights are the number one team because the Raiders really haven't done anything either.
They have that for now. I mean, that's a hard, it's a hard thing to keep. It's a really interesting question about in Tennessee who's bigger, because I don't know about that. It's a good one.
Yeah, I don't either. I didn't want to get involved in it. I don't think that's true, actually.
The Volunteers are the biggest.
Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey, and we love you all. We'll talk to you all soon. Thank you very much, guys. See you tomorrow.